What the bottom line is right now is, as he tries to discredit the FBI and the Justice Department, and he mobilizes the Republicans to go along with that, he is inexorably moving toward a police state. Let's not kid ourselves. He wants to go and get Eric Prince and put together a mercenary separate army. He wants to use the most available terrorist event to be able to declare martial law, to be able to put into effect a world in which he controls it completely.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. That dark assessment of where America is headed under Donald Trump came from Tony Schwartz, a vocal Trump critic and the ghostwriter of The Art of the Deal, who joined me on this show on Saturday. Schwartz's dire warning comes as Trump continues to attack the FBI, the press, and anyone else involved in getting to the bottom of Russian interference in the election that made him president. And as he and his vehement supporters on Capitol Hill and in conservative media question the integrity of Robert Mueller, who for years has probably been the most respected federal law enforcement official in Washington on both sides of the aisle. It's one of those tools of authoritarianism that Trump has down to a science, undercutting anyone who gets in his way or calls his power into question. Like when he tweeted earlier this month about former FBI Director Jim Comey, quote, after years of Comey with the phony and dishonest Clinton investigation running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters, something that those with actual knowledge of the FBI say is simply not true. Or when he repeatedly makes the claim that Russiagate is nothing but a lie.
There is absolutely no collusion. I didn't make a phone call to Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. Everybody knows it. That was a Democrat hoax. It was an excuse for losing the election, and it should have never been this way, where they spent all these millions of dollars.
It begs the question whether Trump will be successful in so distorting reality that even if Bob Mueller finds evidence of collusion between Russia and his campaign, or obstruction of justice or other crimes, Trump and his supporters will simply declare it all fake news and find a way to avoid justice. Joining me now is Malcolm Nance of the Terror Asymmetrics Project, Naveed Jamali, MSNBC Intel analyst and former FBI double agent, Sarah Kendzior, journalist and scholar of authoritarian states, and Anousheh Hossain, writer and commentator. I'm actually going to come to you first, Sarah, because I thought of you when I was on Hardball the other night, and I was asked by Chris Matthews for my assessment of what Donald Trump is doing with all of these attacks on federal law enforcement. This is what I had to say then. I want to get your take, since authoritarian states are your specialty. Step 1, claim the investigation of you is a fraud being conducted by enemies of the state. Step 2, get your state-run media, your affinity media, to echo that into your base and whip them up into a frenzy against those investigating you. Step 3, get the state party, in this case the Republican Party, to echo that from the seat of government. And then, of course, you got to add that last step, call for the prosecution of your political enemies, in this case dredging up Hillary Clinton to again call to lock her up. So, Sarah, I need you to give me a reality check. Am I being hysterical here in equating what Donald Trump is doing with what the kleptocratic leaders of authoritarian states do?
No, you're not being hysterical. Hysterical is just a word that people use to describe women who speak a plain truth. Trump has been on this path from the moment that he declared candidacy, whether it's the persecution of ethnic minorities, his clear intentions to use the government as a kleptocratic tool in order to enhance his family's personal wealth, his targets on free speech, freedom of religion, political opponents. And it's only gotten worse as he's gotten into office, as he's consolidated power, and as he's faced very little opposition from the Republicans, who should be serving the public, who should be keeping people like Trump and in his cadre of, other corrupt and criminal actors in check. And so, no, you're absolutely right to react in the way that you have.
And, Malcolm, this week we saw members of Congress, a co-equal branch of government, literally behaving as if they were the defense counsel for Donald Trump. Right. Attacking the FBI, accusing them of almost being criminals. It was breathtaking to watch Republicans do that, but they did it with such ferocity that you wonder, are they part of Donald Trump's administration, or are they a co-equal branch of government? Meanwhile, we find out that Republicans who are passing this exorbitant tax cut for the wealthy, something like 2/3 of members of Congress are themselves millionaires. It's almost as if Donald Trump and Republicans are creating their own oligarchy. where they're personally being enriched by the tax cuts, personally being enriched by the policy of the administration, and then they turn around and 100% back the leader.
You know, it's funny you should mention that. I'm writing a whole book about this. And, you know, initially when I wrote Plot to Hack America, I thought Donald Trump is an accidental autocrat. This is a guy who's doing things for his own self-worth, his own valuation of his family's stock. He is not doing it to benefit the United States, but he's not doing it with great malice. He's doing it because he only understands money. Now I think he's an autocrat of animosity, where it is done out of hatred of his enemies. And I really do believe some of the things that he's doing now, he thinks that he understands the levers of power. He thinks that he's being surrounded by people who will be obsequious to him and will execute his will. His problem is democracy. Democracy is eating him alive right now. And when he butts up against that, this is very interesting. He goes to the Vladimir Putin playbook. Putin, when he came into power, was in the anti-corruption in the late 1990s.
Yep. Drain the swamp.
First thing he did, drain the swamp, was a Russian phrase. The first thing he did, he bought the news media. Literally got his oligarch friends to buy the news media, and then turned the news media and that fledgling democracy against itself using democratic tools like elections.
Yeah, and you know, you think about it, Reid, and even down to things that we read in George Orwell novels, the idea of banning words themselves. This is the thing that in the last 24 hours that has come forward. We thought it was just at the CDC, but it turns out multiple agencies, including Health and Human Services, were told they are not allowed. This is a piece from the, I think this is in the Washington Post. The Trump administration has informed multiple divisions within the Department of Health and Human Services that they should avoid using certain words or phrases in official documents being drafted for next year's budget. The second HHS agency received similar guidance to avoid using the word entitlement, diversity, and vulnerable, according to an official who took part in a briefing. So the CDC and other agencies are being told they may not use certain words, and also that they must only refer to the Affordable Care Act as Obamacare, because Donald Trump hates Barack Obama, clearly, in Obamacare. These are the 7 words, the 7 banned words: vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. The words that must not be spoken by members of the Trump government.
It's crazy. I mean, look, Joy, he's gone after the federal government. He's disassembled it. The only other target left out there are the cities. I mean, that's really, at this point, we have a barely functioning federal government. The only places that are going to defend these rights are going to be the states and the cities. And I guarantee you the next battle is going to be against the cities. They're going to pull back funding. They tried in the courts. Now you're going to see DOJ with Sessions go after sanctuary cities. And what does an authoritarian state or a police state look like? It's going to look like when the NYPD is now required to get federal funding. When they arrest someone, they're going to have to prove to the federal government that that person is a U.S. citizen. That is going to be the next battle. And it's not going to be the military coming in. It's going to be something as simple as a data call. Yeah. Are you tracking the citizenship of the people that are getting aid, whether it's education, whether it's medical care? That's what they're going to push on, and I think that's the battle.
And I mean, and it's important that they are trying to essentially force blue cities, people who are you know, cities that are run by Democrats who want compassion for the poor, want to protect immigrants, to say, no, you can't do that. We will literally force you to adopt Trumpian policy against your will.
Can I make a quick point? Did you notice when he went to the FBI Academy the other day, right before he went there, he criticized the FBI? Another component of an authoritarian state, a Stasi-like state, is that you pit police, which is what he's doing, the regular beat cops, the million police in the United States, against federal law enforcement, as if he wants to split them as two entities. One completely and totally supports Trump, the other doesn't, or the other is working towards justice. Right? And if he does that, and with the people that he's introduced over at Department of Homeland Security, it's really scary. I mean, you are now pushing towards creating your own instruments within government that will do your will.
It's interesting that you say that, because, you know, my husband and I went to Cuba not long ago, at once it was opened up to be able to go, and you have in Cuba this bifurcation. You have the police, and then you have the guys in the green military uniforms who sort of police the police, and there's sort of two separate agencies that are sort of watching each other in a way that one can actually intimidate the other.
He already has political commissars.
I want to go to Anousheh Hossain on this, because it isn't just Russia, right? You have autocratic governments, Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey. You know, you had Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. You have governments throughout the world that operate as both kleptocracies, essentially a family running a country, and as autocracies where you don't have freedom of speech and where anyone who is considered to be an enemy of the state is purged out of government. We just had this report on Friday by the New York Times. And this is out of the EPA, one of the agencies Republicans have long wanted to get rid of because it stops people from polluting, rich corporations from polluting. EPA contractor has spent the last year scouring the agency for anti-Trump officials. One of the top officials of a consulting firm that the Environmental Protection Agency has recently hired to help it with media affairs has spent the last year investigating agency employees who have been critical of the Trump administration, federal records show. Have you ever heard of an American administration purging federal agencies for ideological dissent?
You know, Joy, I can't even overestimate how terrifying this is. And, you know, going back to the list of words that are actually banned, I mean, the CDC and HHS does so much work for women's health and AIDS. And how can we not use words such as evidence-based? And, you know, the word climate change is already disappearing from government websites as we speak. And it just goes to show that this fake presidency, this fake administration cannot deal with facts.
And, you know, it keeps going on. It goes on. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'll come to you on this, Naveed. Donald Trump has popularized this term fake news. It's one of his favorite phrases. That term has now become popular among autocrats. In countries where press freedom, and this is a report, I don't know where this is from, my producer can tell me what, this is the New York Times. In countries where press freedom is restricted under considerable threat, including Russia, China, Turkey, Libya, Poland, Hungary, Thailand, Somalia, and others, political leaders have invoked fake news as justification for beating back media scrutiny.
I mean, that's exactly part of the playbook. I mean, look, one of the criticisms about Donald Trump, not even criticism, one of the legal challenges he faces is that he asked James Comey to take a loyalty pledge to him. At what point is that going to be brought down to not just the federal government, but is it going to go down to some poor person who's the dog catcher in some small town? At what point do officials in government have to take a loyalty pledge? It's the same thing with media. He doesn't want independent investigative reporting. He wants to be able to release what he wants to release, and that should be it.
And by the way, he has these loyal supporters, this sort of squad of people on the far right, Roger Stone on down, who are hunting media.
That's right.
Who are essentially sending, you know, you had Project Veritas trying to bait media to run fake news stories so they can discredit journalists, trying to get journalists fired, trying to dig up dirt on journalists, and then literally trying to rinse the media of anyone who dissents from Donald Trump so that all that's left are the Fox Newses, the Daily Callers, the people who are willing to be admiring him. I'm sorry, first Anusha and then Malcolm.
Yeah, you know, and we don't really have to look too far to see whose playbook he's following. Look at the men that he admires, the political leaders that he admires around the world. We can call them strong men, but really they're dictators, okay? And the things that he admires about them is because he has no appreciation for democracy. He's running a kleptocracy. He would love to run a country the way Putin runs his country, you know, no press freedom, no checks and balances on people's powers. He would love to run the country the way Duterte is doing in the Philippines. So it's absolutely crazy to me, and it just comes down to, it blows my mind how this man, the president of the United States, is he not a patriot? Is he not a patriot? He believes the Kremlin over U.S. intelligence agencies. Well, it just blows my mind.
We know that he admires Vladimir Putin, Malcolm, the three guys in the world that he most admires, according to a report about 60 sources in the Washington Post: Xi Jinping of China, Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, and Putin.
That's absolutely amazing. This is my point that you were making about the EPA director. All right, we've known for almost a year now that he was putting literally political commissars into the administration. This has never occurred in the history of the United States, where there were people there to test your ideological purity to Donald Trump, not to the Constitution, not to the defense of this nation. The Constitution is under attack. American democracy, as it existed since 1783, when they ratified the Constitution, is under attack. True patriots should stand up to that. If I was in one of these administrations and somebody comes into my office and he says, hey, well, we're going to have to talk about your attitude towards things politically, I'd dime that person out. I mean, you got to go right to your IG's office, because you swear an oath. I swore an oath. He swore an oath. We protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, including within our own government.
We don't do l'état c'est moi. Donald Trump is not the state. And Sarah, you were tweeting, I think you tweeted about this yesterday, that Donald Trump has even invoked the idea that continuing the Russiagate investigation, he said people will die, that the artificial Democratic hit job gets in the way, and that's a shame because people will die because of it, and it's a pure hit job. Do you know what he was talking about when he said that?
No, and if you look at the transcript, it's extremely unclear. It could ostensibly refer to foreign policy regarding North Korea or Syria, but you have to ask what kind of collaboration is he having with Russia? Because we know that there's been a lot of illicit collaboration, a lot of off-the-books collaboration. We know he sought nuclear partnerships with Russia since the 1980s, when he wasn't even involved in government. And when a president casually says that a number of people will die and, gee, that's too bad, that's very disturbing. That's in line with the kind of, cavalier, callous remarks that he's made about Americans who have died, including overseas, his attitude towards veterans. I don't think that he has any respect, not just for the Constitution, not just for the country, but for the sanctity of human life itself. And that is not a quality that you want in a president. And it's alarming that very few people have followed up on that, have asked him, well, what do you mean by that? Who will die and by what mechanism? That's something that people should absolutely be following up on.
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme way to say that you have to end an investigation of potential criminality in his former campaign because it's life and death. I'm going to hold everybody for just 1 second. We're going to take a quick commercial break because we have to pay for this airtime. I'm bringing all of my guests back on the other side. And coming up, Donald Trump is very upset that somebody wants his emails. Irony is dead, but we'll be back.